huge boom in lending.
And where there's a boom, there's a bust.
That's right, Hugh. Already we've seen a number of bubbles, and the Shanghai stock market's down 60% on last year.
I see. And I gather output from toy manufacturers is also shrinking. What does that mean?
Smaller toys.
Silly question, really. So what you're saying is, Robert, they've got their own problems.
Absolutely. And when you add in corruption and a fragile banking system and social tensions and the problem of not knowing how many loans are going to go bad...
Oh, don't start that again.
It's a pretty volatile situation. In fact, the Prime Minister, Wen Jiabao, warned last year that the economy was, quote, unstable, unbalanced, uncoordinated and unsustainable.
Gosh, imagine Gordon Brown saying that. And in Chinese, too. Thanks for that. Robert Peston there. Check out the website. Lots of links and games you can play on there. For the rest of the world to prosper, China needs to keep going. But the country's now reaching the limits of even its capacity. If it continued at the present rate, by 2020, China would be responsible for half the world's trade.
See, what you got to understand is the scale is huge. The workforce in just one Chinese province is larger than what we have in the whole of the USA. There are even factories employing 240,000 people. 240,000. That requires 8,000 pigs a day to feed them. 8,000 pigs. That's enough to feed 8,000 Americans for a whole day. God help us when they really get going. Let me tell you, they're more dependent on exports from the U.S. than we are on them. 25 times more. So if they put the prices up, we can get stuff from Vietnam or Indonesia or South Africa or anywhere else in Europe.
But if the West did that, it might be enough to persuade the Chinese to adopt the retaliatory policies advocated by their leading economist, EP02. But already our eagle-eyed new business secretary has warned against that.
I told them, I said, on the street and in the boardroom, there's a growing sense in China that they're now strong enough to do it all alone, which I think is wrong. So they'd be silly to try. But then great people do silly things. Often 2 or 3 times.
Well, there is always the risk that the Chinese put up their prices, in which case we could go elsewhere for our T-shirts and our golf shoes. Or we could go back to how we did things in the 19th century, when instead of paying them in silver, which we were short of, we paid them in opium instead. And sometimes I look at Afghanistan with its rich poppy harvest, and I think, well, you know, maybe we could kill 2 birds with 1 stone here.
And then there's the whole issue of pollution.
Their cars produce 6% of their carbon emissions. Ours produce 30%. No contest. Home win.
We say we'll clean up our toxic environment. When you start clearing up your toxic bags, at least when we pollute, we only pollute ourselves. You pollute the whole planet.
Although, to be fair, China did cut their pollution dramatically in the summer. But that was so people could actually see the Olympics as opposed to waiting for a javelin to appear through a giant cloud of smog and hit them in the face. Progress is slow and corruption remains a big problem. In the West, governments are held to account by non-governmental organisations. In China, they have what they call government-organised non-governmental organisations. The trick of the last decade has been to get the Chinese to play their part in a bizarre system which sees the poorest people in the world bail out the richest. So now we're all left feeling a little bit like Dr. Faustus, nervously checking his diary and muttering, has it really been 23 years and 11 months since that meeting?
Well, what you've got to remember is that British commercial success has historically been founded on the legendary entrepreneur Willy Wonka's first rule of business. If you're struggling with your own productivity, get someone else to do it for you. And let that someone else be of below average height. Oh, Lord, did I say that out loud?
But at the same time, China can't afford to subsidise American debt to the point where that debt's so huge it brings down the dollar and makes foreign investments there worthless. So China has to run faster and faster just to stand still. They even have national shopping holidays so consumers can buy more goods. But what happens in China affects us all. Instead of being victims of globalisation, we're all part of it. It's like some huge game show that we think we can all win.
So, deal or no deal? We know the rule. Keynesian economics. As growth picks up, led by China, demand exceeds supply, causing inflation.
We know that. Inflated prices. Inflated salaries, mine included. Prices through the roof. Copper, wheat, grain, oil. It's big. It's very big. Rising markets mean a boom in speculation, followed by a bust and a crunch and a recession. Oh! It's the banker. Now remember, he was hoping to get out of derivatives and into oil. Hello? Yes, sir. He's not happy. He's not happy at all. But he is prepared to make us an offer. A very generous offer. A hugely generous offer. He says, can we all sit down together and sort it out? Because it's doing his bloody head in. Deal or no deal?
I'm John Wayne. Is there any better or equal hope in the world, Lincoln asked, than the ultimate justice of the people? We Americans believe there is not. The stonework of our national life is made of this belief. From this belief in man as a responsible being flow the beliefs in his other qualifications which we accept, usually even without bothering to think about them, as parts of that vague condition which we call the American way. His ability, indeed his right to explore the truth in all things. His ability to govern himself. And his ability to handle his own economic problems.
But while capitalism's on the ropes in the West, in China, it's advancing. Already 1/3 of Chinese companies are private, with another third foreign-owned, leaving only a third in state ownership.
It's funny, isn't it? The Chinese government are pushing companies into the private sector as fast as we can take ours into the public sector. Who'd have thought it?
我哋喺中國話，總統同埋巴士見面。喺左手邊有共產黨。We have a saying in China: the two leaders, Hu Jintao and George Bush, come to a crossroads. To the left is communism. To the right is capitalism. We say Bush signals right, turns right. Hu Jintao signals left, but turns right. But this is now a very old joke. Now you all turn left, we all turn right, and all crash into each other. As Mao said, it's a funny old world.
But at the end of the day, one thing's for certain. When we say, who's paying for this? We're absolutely right. Thanks, Who.
Red China's battle plan is spelled out in specific detail. Victory for communism will come through wars of national liberation directed toward the ultimate and absolute defeat of the free world. Striving for peace, nations large and small stand together, strong, alert, determined to respond to wars of aggression that deny people the chance to decide their own destiny.
Next week, having looked at where the money went and where it came from, we ask, how are we going to pay the bills in the future?